is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where today we are diving into another edition of the round recap. It is simple by premise. If you've been here before, you know exactly what's about to go down, but if you're new around here, it is really simple. As I said, we just sit down and we unpack and reflect on the round of football that just went down. And this time around, we are reflecting on round 7. Anzac Day weekend, featuring one of the biggest marquee moments of the AFL calendar year with the Anzac Day clash between Collingwood and Essendon, which this year may have disappointed just a little bit. But we'll get to that, because the round kicked off on Thursday night with the Anzac Day Eve clash between Melbourne and Richmond at the MCG. And it was a game that not many people were too excited about. Don't get me wrong, if you're a Melbourne fan, you're probably up and about the fact that your team's won 2 in a row. If you're a Richmond fan like myself, probably disappointed that we let a game slip that we were very much in, but still a bit excited about the finish that we had, that we managed to bring it in a hell of a lot closer than what this game could have ballooned out to. But overall, the quality of this game, it was rather terrible. It was scrappy. The turnovers were just one too many, and there was just mistake after mistake, and it was scrappy. And it's not as if it was a wet night of football or anything like that. It was just very poor, low-quality football from two teams that are bottom barrel of the competition this year. I mean, Melbourne have won 2 on the trot, don't get me wrong, but they are still playing a very average game of football. And Richmond, obviously, with all the young kids in, I think we had something like 6 under 15 games or something like that. The quality of football is always going to drop off, especially when you're getting used to a system. And I think that's what is so disappointing to myself as a Richmond fan this year. We've seen them come out and bounce Carlton round 1. We saw them put in a very valiant effort against Brisbane a few weeks ago. They come out and beat the Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium, and then coming into this game, I gave us a red-hot chance, and up until half-time, we were well in this game. It was anybody's game. 34, played 30, 4 points behind. I thought, okay, we're going to go inside, we're going to reset, and it's going to be great. We came out and kicked 8 points for the next quarter, and Melbourne came out to kick 39 points. It was the quarter that destroyed us. And we gave away 2 goals from 50-metre penalties, which was absolutely stupid. And to think that we could have brought this back to a much closer contest had we not coughed those easy goals up. It was a little bit frustrating, but I think we need to accept, as Richmond fans or even as neutral fans that are watching Richmond externally, with so many young kids in the system, endurance is going to be a problem. Running games out is going to be a problem. And we have seen the decline of Richmond in most games this year that we have lost, where the drop-off after halftime is just too real. It's just too hard to overcome. But to have fought it back to 20 points and still see the young kids leading the charge is exciting to me. And I'm trying to find positives to cling on to. I don't know whether people come and watch these videos and think I'm too up and about where Richmond's at, but you've got to take it from my point of view. I went into this season thinking we weren't going to win a game of football. We've won 2, we've been competitive in a couple. The drop-offs in some have been a little bit too much to bear at times, but I mean, we're exceeding expectation by many. And I feel this rebuild that we're doing isn't going to take too long to click. I feel we're going to start turning things around, you know, a lot closer than what people give us credit for. On the flip side with Melbourne, I feel they played their biggest card in this game, and it has revealed a lot about them moving forward. You've got Max Gawn, who at the end of this year might only be looking at maybe a year or 2 more before he starts contemplating retirement, just purely based on age. Based off talent, he can keep playing. He's got tons of it. But to bench him for the final 12 to 15 minutes of the game and put him on ice, and the game saw Richmond after that point put on 4 or 5 goals in succession and bring it back to 20 points, tells me that Max Gawn is the most critical component to the Melbourne machine. And once he is no longer part of that machine might not run anymore. That machine might fail to even start. It is rather alarming a fact. And to think that there is no heir apparent to take his spot. You know, they had a Brodie Grundy. They trade him off for basically nothing. I don't know why they even brought him into the club if they weren't going to utilise him. They've got Tom Fullerton, but Fullerton really isn't getting enough of a crack to really assert himself when it comes to Max Gawn taking a break. And that now provides more questions than than answers as to when you can afford to give Max Gawn a break. Do you have to do it during the third quarter at the most pivotal points? I mean, the third quarter is the premiership quarter by many, because that's the quarter where most games are won and lost, especially if the game is so tight at halftime and you can get that momentous lead. You can shift momentum your way. Where do Melbourne go from here? How do they treat Max Gawn? Max Gawn can't play 100% game time. He needs to take breaks. When do those happen? Because whenever he was off the ground, Melbourne were a completely different team and Richmond were able to get advantage over that. If a team like Richmond that is struggling and rebuilding can capitalise on Max Gawn being off, imagine a team like Geelong, Collingwood, even Carlton, who is starting to turn their fortunes around. The Bulldogs are starting to play really well. GWS might have lost a couple, but they're still in the same boat. When you do it against better teams, this is going to be a gap that gets closed incredibly quickly. And still with a makeshift forward line, I don't know whether Melbourne can be good enough to sustain it, especially, heaven forbid, if Max Gawn goes down with an injury. If Max Gawn was to go down right now and wasn't available for the rest of the year, I reckon Melbourne finish in the bottom four. Big call, I know, but I don't see how they win games without Max Gawn. He is too critical to their composure overall. But at the end of the day, Melbourne's 12-11-83 defeated Richmond's 9-9-63 and kicked off the weekend on a good note for Melbourne fans, on a sour note for Richmond fans. But as for the quality of the game, I think everybody as a whole, a little bit disappointed. Friday afternoon saw the marquee game in lights. The MCG was absolutely packed. We had Collingwood taking on Essendon in the usual Anzac Day clash that we have come to love and respect on the AFL calendar every single year. And this game, again, a game up until halftime, looked incredibly competitive. Collingwood led Essendon 22-7 in the first quarter. There was still realm for Essendon to come back, but Collingwood seemed to have everything under control. By halftime, Collingwood's 41 played Essendon's 33. They had really turned their fortune around, Essendon, and it looked like we were going to be in for a red-hot finish. Even during the third quarter, and by the end, at three-quarter time, 75 played 51. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility for Essendon to come back. But when Collingwood come out in that second half and managed to pile on 10 goals 6 as opposed to Essendon's 5 goals 3, it was one hell of an effort, especially given the conditions that this game was played in. It was pissing down rain. It was a slog fest. It was a little bit sloppy in the second half because of that. And to have players like Jamie Elliott come out and kick 5 in those conditions was huge. To have Steele Sidebottom have 30 plus, Josh Dacos find 30 plus, Nick Dacos had 30 plus. Their usual suspects went to town and carried Collingwood over the line in what should have been a much closer contest given the weather conditions. Opened up incredibly to make the game a lot more contested. There was going to be a lot more tackles in the wet. You're not going to be able to be taking the ball clean. But Collingwood's skills just on the ground, above head, absolutely fantastic. I said it a couple of weeks ago, and I will really reiterate it as I stumble right now. Collingwood, I feel, are the most complete and informed team in the competition at this point in time. We are currently just shy of a third of the way into the season, and I think Collingwood are now the standard bearers. Defensively, they are so good. Offensively, they are absolutely fantastic. The midfield, we know, is absolutely stacked, and it's with young kids as well coming through. Ned Long getting an opportunity, and I feel he's been amongst Collingwood's best since a couple of weeks ago. He has just come on and set the world on fire. He is one of their most improved by a long shot. Talk about a breakout year. It was soured, however, with a very damper note, because one of their star recruits, well, they brought him in a couple of years ago, but he's starting to finally find a little bit of continuity in his game, and everyone was getting up and about. But Dan McStay has gone down with an injury that is going to see him miss a few weeks. He has gone and injured his knee. I have heard it could be anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks that he is essentially going to miss. Could be longer. It's always incredibly disheartening to see a player go down, but a player that they're starting to really rally against and build this forward line around, very painful for Collingwood. On the same note, Jones went down with an ankle injury. I don't know the severity of it, but Essendon over recent weeks have been hit from pillar to post with injury. We've seen them lose Sam Draper, so now Peter Wright has to come in not as a forward but play a ruck role because Nick Bryan is also injured. We still have Darcy Parish coming back from injury as well, but does Darcy Parish even fit in to Essendon's calculations anymore? They're performing incredibly well without him, and it now puts question marks around Essendon as to whether or not they move him on at the end of the year. I personally feel they should try to maximise his tradability and his profile and his stock, so when it comes to getting traded, they can get more than what he's worth. They can try to milk it. I mean, he's been linked to Geelong. Geelong would probably offer him a Cotton On sponsorship and buy him a farm out somewhere and try to hide his salary cap under the table. I don't even fucking know how Geelong's doing it anymore because they're already now linked to Harley Reid all of a sudden as well. So it's going to be a very interesting watch, I think, for Essendon with Darcy Parish and where he sits. But obviously another injury doesn't sit incredibly well given the circumstances around where Essendon's list is at. Having a look at the Anzac Day medal voting for this game, it was pretty unanimous that Steele Sidebottom was best on ground, and he put in a tremendous effort. There was another two players named. Josh Dacos was one, and Jamie Elliott was another, and it was all shuffled around Jamie and Josh between 2 and 3. But I thought Nick Dacos played a very good game as well, and that's not me glazing Nick Dacos at all, because I feel they talk about Nick Dacos sometimes a little bit too much. Like the AFL were posting, oh, Nick Dacos is now 1 from 1 for coin tosses as captain. It's like, are you guys fucking serious? Like, what the fuck's going on here? Josh played great, but I thought Nick Dacos might have been even just a little bit better given, you know, the clearance work he did and how he was able to get other teammates into the game. Being able to win clearances and getting those ground ball gets in the wet, I think was critical. But when Collingwood have so many players standing tall, you know, it becomes a problem maybe for things like Anzac Day medal voting, but it's a great problem to have for Craig McRae, because when you've got so many players that are starting to outperform and shine as bright as they are, you are on track to having a great season. I'm, at this point in time, convinced that there is no way Collingwood finishes outside of the top 4 by the end of the year. Big call now, maybe, but I don't see how it happens. With Essendon, I think maybe the injuries are going to stack up a little bit too much, and they might just miss the 8 this year. But this was a bigger blowout than I thought. I thought at one point it was going to be 10 goals, but 41 points the way of Collingwood on Anzac Day, when we've become so used to a much tighter contest. It was something to behold. Friday night, we saw Fremantle taking on Adelaide over at Optus Stadium. I don't know how I feel about having 2 games on Anzac Day when it falls on a Friday. I feel if it was, you know, Anzac Day, Friday, I know we like Friday night footy. You know, we don't want to really take the Anzac Day game into a twilight kind of spot, but I feel that day should only be dedicated to the Anzac Day game itself. I think we can fixture out the rest of the games over the weekend, even if there's an extra couple of games, even if we do a Monday afternoon game over Anzac weekend. I'm not sure. That's just how I feel. I feel that it should be just a dedicated day to that game because it means so much to so many. Even as a neutral supporter, Collingwood Essendon Anzac Day is one of my most anticipated football games of the AFL year. But this game here ended up being a bit of a banger in the end. I'm 18 points the way of Fremantle. I thought Adelaide were going to be competitive. They could have been a hell of a lot more had they been accurate. But this was another game that saw both teams coming in with something to prove. Fremantle only just losing to Melbourne the week prior, needed to bounce back at home. And Adelaide, serving it to GWS in a scrappy contest, needed to show a little bit of continuity. And I feel, even though Adelaide looked good in parts, that continuity failed to be delivered, because it is yet again a very winnable game for them. Even though it is on the road, even though it is in Western Australia and, you know, Fremantle go in with the Perth home advantage, you can't deny that Adelaide don't have a list to be able to go over and defeat Fremantle. Adelaide have had a list over the last couple of years that can do damage, but it's their continuity that lets them down. They can win emphatically at home, they hit the road, and they're fucking terrible. And I don't understand where the gap closes. And I feel that's the story for a few teams that travel interstate when coming, you know, into Melbourne or going elsewhere. Adelaide, I said at the start of the year, I had them outside of my top 8, but I said if they could find continuity in their game, they could be a top 8 team. Hell, moving forward, they could be a top 4 team if things clicked for them, and some people might think that's a very outrageous fucking statement to say, but I'll stick by it. Fremantle's the same though. Fremantle have lacked continuity this year, and it's their inability to string games together that has really hurt them. You know, they should have won against Melbourne quite comfortably, in my opinion. They won this game. They absolutely belted Richmond, and that's where I fail to see where this continuity drops off. You'd think that this momentum is a wave they could carry through, but it's a wave that they ride the highs, and then all of a sudden the wave just disappears and they free fall, and then all of a sudden a wave comes back in and they'll ride it again. I don't know where these teams go from this point. Both of them, obviously, one loss, don't get me wrong, that's how games always work out, but Fremantle need to take this momentum and run with it if they're going to be considered a serious contender, and Adelaide just need to recapture form and learn to win on the road. It is a concept to me that when you've got such a strong list and fail to deliver, just kind of blows my mind, because when you look at Adelaide and the drafting they have done and the trading they have done and the list they've currently got, there is no conversation that can't be had that has them, you know, outside of the realm of possibility of being a contender. Maybe not a premiership contender, but definitely a finals contender. I think most people could at least get on board with that fact. Fremantle, if they got their shit together, should be within the premiership contender conversation, because have a look at the list they've got and the acquisitions they have picked up. Shea Bolton might be a player that has a good string of games and then has an odd one where he doesn't perform. But he does make Fremantle's list infinitely greater because it gives them a burst of excitement. And since coming over to Fremantle, he's performed very well. He's hit the scoreboard. He's laying tackles, which is not something that you usually see Shea Bolton doing. He's racking up possessions. He's finding a way to get involved. He is the explosive player that Fremantle expected. But then you'll have a player like Jai Amos go missing. And then you've got, when Amos is on tune and on song and he's kicking goals, Tracy goes missing. You have Luke Jackson performing incredibly well in the ruck, and then he goes and injures himself. Sean Darcy comes in, but Sean Darcy's undercooked, so he's not delivering at the same level as what Luke Jackson is. You've got Luke Ryan and Jordan Clark working their asses off in defence. Caleb Sarong killing it in the midfield. Andrew Brayshaw, one of the most criminally underrated midfielders in the competition. Everybody coming into this year was talking about how good Caleb Sarong has been. You cannot tell me Andrew Brayshaw has not been their number one player since round one, moving all the way through. At this point in time, he should be dominating the Brownlow count when it comes to the votes that Fremantle have received. He has had somewhat of a year. He had a great year last year, but he's built on top of that, and he's priming himself. I honestly feel with the way that Andrew Brayshaw has held himself this year, he might have a Brownlow in his future. If Fremantle can become one of those teams that, you know, actively is in that premiership window, because let's face facts, in order to win a Brownlow, you need to be winning games of football, because that's how the umpires their votes fall. They fall the way of the winning team, which I feel shouldn't always be the case. If there's a losing team that somebody is outperformed, they should be within that vote calculation. But Andrew Brayshaw's having an incredible year, and it was highlighted again in this game with Andrew Brayshaw taking out the best on-ground rights and winning the medal tied to this particular game. Incredible by Fremantle. But again, as I said, and I've said a couple of times already, let's see whether continuity just is something that they can find and capture, or is it something that's going to elude them? Same as Adelaide. Are they going to reset and find a little bit of momentum to ride again, or are they going to just not rock up and be a little bit less competitive? It's double-edged sword for both. Be interesting to see how they grab it moving forward. The first game on Saturday saw St Kilda hosting Brisbane at Marvel Stadium. And coming into this game, it was hard to deny that Brisbane was not going to rock up and do damage, and that is exactly what they did. St Kilda, unfortunately, never looked like they were in this game, and from the get-go, it was just Brisbane all the way through. It was Brisbane at quarter-time leading 30-12 rather. At halftime, they led 56-22. At three-quarter time, it was 85-47, and then by the end of the game, 118-73. And there were some questions posed to myself leading into last week's recap video, which I answered. So if you did miss that recap, feel free to go check out the playlist in the description down below and you can check it out. But we were talking about Ross Lyon as a coach and how St Kilda are set up as a team, and my thoughts on the whole process. And this was a game that epitomised those talking points and the feelings that I've got, because Ross Lyon has come out and said, basically, again, he's reiterated that the tough conversations need to happen and, you know, they need to do better. And Words can only take you so far. You need to put action into place, and that might mean that you need to start axing some players and sending them back to the VFL. It was the usual suspects standing up for St Kilda. Brad Hill had a decent game. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira was probably their best on ground, if not behind Brad Hill. Jack Steele actually bounced back this week after having a poor couple of weeks, had 29 touches, but still around the contest didn't feel like he was adding all too much to it, which is a little bit concerning. Sinclair had 29, but again, did he have as much impact? It's coming to a point where some of these players, and it's never going to happen, you're never going to see a Jack Steele or a Jack Sinclair sent back to the VFL, but that would make a statement piece. That would be telling you that, you know, you need to pull your finger out of your ass or you're going to fucking have a bad time. It's not going to be taken seriously. Having a look at some of these outcomes though, I mean, Rowan Marshall, he had enough of the ball, but I mean, he had a fair few hitouts as well. I mean, I think he pretty much dominated the hitouts against McInerney, 25-40. But even then, it felt like McInerney had a better game overall than what Rowan Marshall did. Rowan Marshall wasn't doing Rowan Marshall things. He kicked a goal, okay, he had 18 possessions, yeah, alright. Oscar McInerney had 4 less, he kicked a goal as well, and managed to get, you know, more time around the ground. He had more clearances overall, he laid more tackles, he was a more complete player. And it's weird to say when comparing Oscar McInerney to Rowan Marshall, because you'd think on paper Rowan Marshall would have Oscar McInerney absolutely cleared. There was some decisions made that saw... Oh, who was it that was subbed out? Was it Hugo Garcia that was subbed out early? I can't even remember. I cannot even remember. Does it show who was subbed out in the game? If I look through the match report live. Here we go. Me not doing my fucking research. But I'm pretty sure it was... Yep, Hugo Garcia was subbed out during the second quarter. There was no injury. He was just taken off. And it makes me think, why is that the case when Hugo Garcia has been one of the better younger talents on this list, you know? And it just blows my mind. It's up in the air. I feel St Kilda at this point in time need to come to the quick realisation that A, Ross Lyon is not the coach that is going to win them another premiership. So if their next premiership is not going to be won with Ross Lyon at the helm, maybe it's time to start looking around for a coach that may take them there. No Max King in your forward line and offloading a player like, or delisting rather, a player like Tim Membry means that you're now batting incredibly shallow in your key forward stocks. And you know, you have a young kid coming in, he's only played a handful of games. You can't ride your entire forward line on the back of that kid. So do you need to start targeting key position players during the trade period instead of throwing around, you know, millions of dollars for a Finn Callahan or a, you know, Tom de Koning? You know, you need to do list management a hell of a lot better. And this is why it's going to bite them in the ass, because over the last few years, Ross Lyon has been so hell-bent on making sure that he drafts the best defenders because he loves building a defensive team. It is all good to build a defensive team, but when you're coughing up 17 goals in a game, how fucking good is that defense doing for you? I'm just saying. On the flip side, Brisbane doing Brisbane things. They're actually finding ways to win on the road. They're looking as good a team as they have been over the course of the year, and they're really defending this premiership that they won incredibly well. At this point in time, I would probably say a Collingwood versus Brisbane grand final is the more probable outcome of what we've seen over the team's performances 7 rounds in. And they've still got players to come back. They still have a Kitty Coleman that is working on his return. I haven't seen a handful of other players that could be making an immediate impact in this team as well. You know, Kai Lohmann has only just come back from injury into this team. So while they've got some youth running around, they still have some experience to come back in, and some experience that have some deadly weapons as well. We all saw how Kitty Coleman performed in the grand final last year. So once they get those gears clicking and those pieces back in place, Brisbane could be an absolute juggernaut. But for the time being, Brisbane's comfortably sitting where they deserve to be, and St Kilda supporters probably very frustrated because they should be doing a hell of a lot better, but they seem to be chasing tail because they're just getting dished up the exact same shit week in and week out. Down at Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide hosted North Melbourne in a game that ended up being a hell of a lot fucking closer than I anticipated it to be. I was expecting this to be an absolute whitewash. At quarter time, Port Adelaide led 45-16, and I thought, here we go, Port Adelaide are on their way to a 100-point win. And to be quite honest with you, a 10-goal win, given the circumstances that both of these clubs are in, should have probably been a foreseeable outcome that a lot of people would have expected. We shifted to halftime, and North Melbourne, even though Port Adelaide still managed to cling on to a lead, had brought it back 59-47. And I thought to myself, here we go, this is only a couple of goals. They're right in this. At three-quarter time, it was 80 playing 67. And I thought, this is going to come down to the wire. This is a game that North Melbourne are going to steal, and this is going to be an upset of the century. The game finished 97-88. Both teams fighting so incredibly hard, but it was Port Adelaide's 14-13-97 defeating North Melbourne's 13-10-88. Such an incredible game of football. And as a neutral supporter, just watching these two teams go at it was incredible. And there was heat, there was passion. You know, they were getting stuck into Jason Horne-Francis, and Horne-Francis was losing his temper. It had theatrics. It had some great skill on display. It was a great watch. And I've got to really tip my hat to Ken Hinkley for making some of the moves he has. Connor Rozee to halfback flank. Let's not understate how pivotal that role has been for Port Adelaide since making that change, because Connor Rozee by foot is incredible, and moving him to halfback and having him kind of as the general running off there, with then Zach Butters in the midfield being the midfield general, there's no clashing kind of systems going on there. They can do their own thing, and it's been great to watch. And you know, there's no surprise to why, you know, Zach Butters was given the best on ground honours in this game. There's no surprise that Connor Rozee was among Port Adelaide's best. Horne-Francis finding some continuity. Pal Pepper stepping it up like we knew he could. Tristan Cherry in this game was fucking sensational, getting back to his best. And while, you know, North Melbourne might not have got the win, they still had players that were performing incredibly well. It's just a shame that they weren't able to get the chocolates at the end of the day. You know, some people felt that, you know, there was a better rub of the green going a certain way to Port Adelaide versus North. I mean, when you have a look at the free kick count, it's actually gone the other way. North Melbourne had a better rub than what Port Adelaide did. So you can argue semantics. You can say that, you know, the ones that weren't paid were the ones that were deadly. But at the end of the day, Port Adelaide digging deep and finding a way to win a close contest this time around. And North Melbourne finding some competitiveness. And I feel even though they lost, North Melbourne fans can walk away from this game seeing that there has been some sort of progression moving forward. As a Richmond fan, for example, coming into this year, I just wanted to see gradual improvement and seeing the young kids get to work. North Melbourne is still very much in that boat as well. A lot of fresh faces, a lot of young kids, and just seeing them do what they do is incredible. I mean, Harry Sheezel comes out and has 30-odd possessions in this game, starting to get back to his best after a slow start. And then you've got idiots like Kane Corn that comes out saying, you know, fucking, he's stat padding and he's running around halfback getting useless touches. This is the same guy that they put back to halfback, and since doing so, North Melbourne have found a better kind of flow with their game style. I feel that him off halfback flank is inevitable. I think that is his position to play. And it's just a shame that a young kid is trying so fucking hard to recapture some form and the media throw him under the bus. But there always needs to be a narrative, right? There always needs to be somebody pissing on your parade and dragging you down. But as I said, Tristan Cherry was incredible. Luke Davies-Uniacke battled hard. Harry Sheezel was fantastic. They weren't without their faults, but this was a game I feel they could hang their hats on. So I think, realistically, coming out of this game, supporters from both clubs should be happy with the outcome. Port Adelaide with the win. North Melbourne on the road, mind you, at Port Adelaide's home turf, managing to come within 2 kicks. I'd take that as a win. Speaking of wins, boy, did fucking the Bulldogs put on a party down at Manuka Oval. Well, up at Manuka Oval, considering where I'm located. But anyway, the Bulldogs are back in town, and GWS, they've dropped the ball 2 weeks running. It is incredible to think that a team that we've seen so dominant in the earlier parts of the season are finding, you know, ways to fumble as bad as they have. And this was a game that, you know, for the first half, you could have flipped a coin to guess where the ball was going to land and which team was going to win. GWS heading in 21-15 at quarter time. At half time, they were behind 48-53, but still, that is only 5 points the difference. It is anybody's game after that. But then the onslaught goes down. In the third quarter, GWS managed 1 behind when the Bulldogs have come out and they have kicked 5 goals 3. The Bulldogs then go on to kick a further 4 goals 3 for the rest of the game. And GWS left it a little bit too late. Unfortunately, they come out and they kick 5 goals 2 for the rest of the game. But it's just that one quarter that let them down. And we saw similar things happen against Adelaide. You'd think after a very scrappy game of football the week prior, back at home with their forward line effectively back in full force, GWS would be kicking bags and winning this quite comfortably. And James Harmes comes out and kicks the most goals on the day with 4 goals. What? Jesse Hogan is playing. Toby Green is playing. And James Harmes kicks 4? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I don't understand. And this was a game, again, when you look at the stats, very similar to last week when they played Adelaide. Most of the stat leaders from GWS are the main contributors around the ball. Lockie Ash, 31. Lockie Whitfield, 30. Tom Green has 27. Finn Callahan, not O'Callaghan, but Finn Callahan has 26. Josh Kelly has 21. But it's still the efforts of Tom Liberatore, Ed Richards, Joel Frazier back to his best, Matthew Kennedy, arguably in my eyes the best recruit of the year. Everyone's talking about Bailey Smith. Hardly anybody's giving Matthew Kennedy his fucking due chocolates and his just desserts. You know what I'm saying? He's been absolutely incredible for the Bulldogs. Marcus Bontempelli got subbed out during the final quarter and was still one of the Bulldogs' most influential on the day. They had a big enough lead that they were able to take Marcus Bontempelli off the ground and still maintain that gap. They didn't do what Melbourne did when they pulled off Max Gawn. And they're still yet to get better. They omitted Liam Jones this week. They still have Adam Treloar to come back into their system. Heaven knows when fucking Jamara Ugle-Hagen's going to come back. I have a sneaky suspicion that we are not going to see Jamara Ugle-Hagen play for the rest of the year. After the comments that Luke Beveridge came out with and basically confirming that Jamara is picking and choosing when to rock up and is pretty much taking the piss, it is not a good sign. And I think it's a bit of a cop-out when there's conversations going saying, oh, Jamara Ugle-Hagen's suffering from a lot of anxiety and he can't play football. But he can happily be pissing up at a pub or going to the clubs and posting all about it on social media and telling people that he's having sex with their mums and whatever else the fuck is going on. Again, I thought at the start of the year that the Bulldogs were going to have a pretty shaky year given the exits that they had, given I feel that there might still be some inner turmoil going on, but the Bulldogs getting it done and doing it against one of the teams better in form teams. I don't know whether we put them within the premiership window right now, but they're playing a good enough brand of football to be contesting for it, which is absolutely scary. Speaking of scary, after a very shaky first half, the Gold Coast come back out and absolutely obliterate Sydney. And again, I said last week after Richmond defeated the Gold Coast, it's just a minor slip for them. They're going to come out and they're going to be absolutely dominant the next week. And I wasn't wrong. This was a game that I thought should have been, to many, dead in the water by quarter time. Gold Coast 14 playing Sydney's 39. I thought, how in the fuck have Sydney found a way to come out and press as hard as they did against the Gold Coast with the players that they've got missing? At halftime even, 42-59, I still felt Sydney had wrestled all of that momentum on their side of the line. And then for the rest of the game, it was just all the way of the Gold Coast. Sydney, for the rest of the game, only managed to kick 3 goals 2. The Gold Coast went on to kick 11 goals 9. That is fucking incredible. Talk about a game of two halves. Sydney, impressive in the first, and then Gold Coast just getting back into their systems in the second half. It was incredible to think that a game that turned on its head as quick as it did had some players for the Gold Coast underperform to the standards that they have set for themselves. As I bring up the stats for the game, for example, Matt Rowell, he only had 16 disposals. He didn't have the numbers that he usually has. Bailey Humphrey only had the 18 disposals, but I feel was actually close enough to best on ground for the Gold Coast. He kicked 4. He was getting clearances. He was laying tackles. It was one of the most complete performances I have seen from Bailey Humphrey overall. John Noble has 30 disposals off of half-back. Tuke Miller has 24, but he goes absolutely bananas with the score involvements. Daniel Rioli doing his thing. Sam Flanders finding the ball. You know, Lockie Weller was amongst their best this week. Ben King, after being kept to 1 goal and fuck all touches by Noah Bolter the week prior, comes out and kicks 5 against Tom McCartan. What? Like, this game turned on its head real quick. It was a game that I walked away from at half-time, confident that Sydney had the win. And then later that night, I saw the final score and I thought, what the fuck happened? Well, I was gone for the second half. Gold Coast won. That's what happened. And to think we're 7 rounds in and the Gold Coast have only lost 1 game of football. They could be finals bound this year. And with their best being put on show so far, their best can compete against the best. And that puts them in a position to maybe not only play finals for the first time in their club's history, but win a final at the same time. Could you imagine the memes going around if Gold Coast managed to win a final before Essendon do? Oh, it's going to be glorious. We then shift over to the MCG, which saw Carlton hosting Geelong in a game that I honestly thought Geelong was going to run all over the top of Carlton. I didn't expect Carlton to be as competitive as they were. I didn't expect them to get the jump on Geelong like they did. Carlton just looked the better team all day, and even though Geelong rallied and they did incredibly well to come back given the circumstances they found themselves in, this was a game that, after quarter time, Carlton grabbed the reins and took absolute control. Quarter time was 21-20. It was anyone's game. Roll the dice, 1 point. Carlton then went on to kick 5 goals 2 in the second term, with Geelong only managing to score the 2 goals 2. They then furthered that by kicking another 4 goals 3, with Geelong mustering the 3 goals. And then in the final term, Carlton slipping a little bit. 2 goals 2, playing Geelong's 4 goals straight. Could have been a different tale of the tape if Geelong had been more competitive during the points where the game was really on the line, and that was that transition in the second and third term. Carlton just came out a completely different beast, flipped the switch, and managed to get the job done. And again, it was off the back of the usual suspects. You know, George Hewitt, Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh. It was a game that surprisingly Adam Chera probably had his worst outing for the year, but he still managed to find a way to stay involved. Charlie Curnow was able to still hit the big sticks and find a way to score. Jeremy Cameron still put in a decent effort. I mean, Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow combined for 6 goals between them, so that's a great outing for the two of them. Lockie Fogarty kicked 2 as well. Will White managed to score again. There was a handful of ones all the way along, but it was just a very dominant performance from Carlton, outside of maybe a Bailey Smith, who I thought was Geelong's best and one of the best on the day despite being in the losing team. And again, that brings about the conjecture and that discussion point of whether or not players should be recognised when it comes to things like Brownlow votes and best on ground performances for other medals if they're in a losing side, if they've been one of the better players on the field. And that's why I like doing what I do here with the round recap. When it comes to the MVP votes, when it comes to the team of the week, if a player's outperformed in that particular role and it comes to voting and giving them votes and recognising them, I'll do it because I feel it needs to be more widely done and recognised. But Carlton stringing 3 in a row. Daniel Gorringe thinks that Carlton are back in town. He's got the Tupperware lids and he's saying the lids are off. Geelong, again, this could be just another loss in the system that they need to endure early on. I still feel Geelong is still going to be at the end of the season. They're going to be at the pointy end. They're going to be competing for a premiership because even though Geelong, might drop games like this, when push comes to shove, they're resilient. They're always around. When it comes to the end of the year, they're always one of those final battling teams because they build their list so incredibly well. Questionably, by some, maybe, but they still manage to find a way. So definitely not alarm bells for Geelong. This is just a loss that they'll cop early and it will make them better for it. Carlton, 3 in a row. Going to be interesting to see how they go moving forward because I'm not entirely sure whether or not Pitnet came back into this game yet. I don't think he did, but it's going to be a different beast for Carlton when he does come into the mix because this dominance that Tom De Koning has been having, does that disappear when he now has to share that role? And I think that's the most interesting watch because Pitnet come out earlier in the season saying that he's in the best form of his life. He's feeling great, that Voss has a 2-pronged ruck plan to go about. So it's going to be interesting when the time comes. But to see Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow clicking, to see the midfield get back to their best, it's hard to not push the envelope and say that Carlton are starting to find form and they're going to get back to their best again. I said in my tipping video heading into this round that I felt Carlton aren't thereabouts yet and they might miss out on finals, but with the way they performed in this game, finals might be definitely on the cards. And I know we're still 2/3 of the way out from that point in time happening, but when they're playing this good, it's hard to not recognise them, as much as it pains me deep down to do so. The final game of the round ended up being an absolute whitewash in a game that, again, in the first quarter, could have been anybody's game, and I feel that is the story of this entire round. 1 quarter of football gone, flip a coin. Anybody could have won. I think maybe outside of Brisbane versus St Kilda, because the disparity was way too big at quarter time. But this game, Hawthorn led West Coast 20-13, and I thought to myself, there's no way West Coast can be competitive, right? There's no way by halftime they're still within reach. At halftime, Hawthorn had ballooned out 64-29, and it was game over from there. They just ran away with it. They managed to put on another 20 points in the third term, but again, Hawthorn found a way to stack on another 22 points of their own. And then in that final term, they went out and kicked a further 6 goals too. And West Coast, to their to highlight, I suppose, they still managed a way to kick 11 goals in a game of football against a premiership contender, which I think is great to hang your hat on. But the drop-off was too real. I think it's a little bit different for West Coast than it is for Richmond, because you'd think at this point in time, given how long West Coast have been gradually building for, that they would have things clicking by now, that they would have been past this rebuild stage. But I still feel very much they're in a rebuild stage, and it's not just in, but it feels like they've only just restarted one. I don't know whether West Coast fans would agree with me here, but again, it was just incredibly disappointing. And I know a few West Coast fans that were not just upset, but pissed off with the effort. I mean, I'm pretty sure, and this is a big talking point now, because Harley Reid, coming out of this year, everybody's saying, oh, he's going to, clubs are going to want to get him, and they're going to want to, get him back to Victoria. People are going to be throwing their hat in the ring. I know for a fact Richmond are apparently one of those teams that are interested in Harley, especially knowing that we've got two handy first picks up our sleeve next year. But Harley Reid manages to concede 6 free kicks for the game, which is double what any other player did, because, again, Harley Reid is an egotist who loves to fucking throw weight around behind the ball instead of trying to win the ball himself. Now, okay, let's look at his stats. Let's see if he backed it up. He had 19 disposals, 3 tackles, 7 clearances, and 2 goals. Was actually a pretty good performance, and I'll give him credit there, but giving away 6 free kicks for the game out of pure stupidity makes people second guess whether or not he is going to be the heir apparent. Now, Kane Cornes proved on the weekend that maybe he's not as biased against Richmond as what he's led people to believe, because he posed a question to David King on SEN saying, would you rather take Sam Lawler or Harley Reid? David King said he would take Harley Reid. Kane Cornes said he would take Sam Lawler because he feels he is a very selfless player. He is better drilled. He's better with ball in hand. I'm probably a little bit biased because I'm a Richmond man, but I definitely feel in the handful of games Lawler has played for Richmond, he has been infinitely greater than what Harley Reid has for West Coast. And that's saying something, because Lawler's played 6 games of football. Harley Reid's in his 2nd year. So, interesting watch to see what happens with Harley at the end of the year, because I feel some teams might get put off by the ego, by the attitude. Some teams might get turned on by the attitude and think bringing a bad boy over might be a good deal. Him signing with Puma and Richmond being a Puma sponsor, there's people trying to dive deep going, oh, is he going to move to Richmond because he's aligning with a Richmond sponsor? Quite personally, I would forego bringing Harley Reid to Richmond. I don't want him. We already have enough problems off field as it is. We don't need another bad boy running around getting headlines in the Victorian papers. Let's just leave it. Let's dedicate our efforts elsewhere. If Zach Butters is gettable, and we've been linked to him, let's not try to get a Zach Butters. But Harley Reid, talk of the town, yet again. I mean, as I said, 6 free kicks against. I'd love to look at his stats this year collectively and see how many free kicks he's given away. Actually, bear with me. I'm going to do that right now. Harley Reid this year, in the 7 games of football he has played, has given away 19 free kicks. He has only laid 2 more tackles comparatively to the amount of free kicks he has given away. He has taken less marks than he has given free kicks. He has had 1 more inside 50 than he has had free kicks against. He has had 4 less rebound 50s than he has been given free kicks. He has had 2 more clangers than he has had free kicks. It's alarming. It is alarming to me. I don't understand. And that's why conversation points are now starting about whether or not he is worth, 2 number 1 picks, whether he's even worth the 1 number 1 pick. I don't know. The conversation point's going to be said at the end of the year, but this is why I said last week or even the week before when they dropped Tim Kelly, if you're happy to drop Tim Kelly, and Tim Kelly's been one of your better performers, okay, he's been lacking on form, don't get me wrong, but when you've got so many players missing due to injury and you're wanting to find a little bit of continuity in your game, and you go and drop your best available midfielder when you've still got Harley Reid going and pulling the shit that he's doing, I'd be sending Harley Reid back to the waffle and fucking putting my foot down, especially as a new coach who wants to instill a system in place, that wants to build a culture. Fucking do it. If you're a West Coast fan, let me know if you agree. As a Hawthorn fan, you're eating good, you've won comfortably, your team's getting back to form, James Warple looked great, Newcomb doing Newcomb things, Gunston kicks a handful, Marbior Chol kicks a handful, Josh Battle, one of the better games I've seen him play as a Hawk, definitely amongst the best on the day. Lloyd Meek setting a brand new record for hitouts for Hawthorn. He had 58 of the bastards, beating Big Boy McAvoy's previous score. I think it was 53 or 54. It was as comprehensive a team effort as I've seen from Hawthorn this year. They're back on track, and they're still well within that premiership window. They looked tasty. With the rounds discussed, we can now turn our attention to the ladder and see where those outcomes have our teams placed. And again, there are plenty of ties on points, but these percentages, I think they're going to play a big margin when it comes to dividing where the teams are going to fall this year. More than they have in recent years, especially with some of the huge percentages we are seeing. Currently leading the charge, as I said, Collingwood in first place on 24 points. We have Brisbane nipping at their heels, tied on the same amount of points, but separated by almost 27% difference. The Gold Coast sit in third on 20 points, with Hawthorn moving up to fourth place after their win over the West Coast with 20 points themselves. Adelaide sit in fifth with 16 points, followed by GWS, who have dropped to 6th, Geelong, who have dropped to 7th, and the Bulldogs rounding out the top 8. But we have Fremantle knocking on the door in 9th and Port Adelaide in 10th, all tied on 16 points with Adelaide in 5th place. Following them, we have Carlton, who has moved up to 11th, Essendon, who has moved down to 12th, and St Kilda, who have dropped to 13th, all effectively tied on 11th place with 12 points. We then have Sydney in 14th, Melbourne, who have moved up to 15th after their win against Richmond, and Richmond dropping to 16th after their loss to Melbourne. Each of those teams effectively tied on 14th place. We have North Melbourne with 4 points, who have dropped to 17th, and the West Coast still looking for their first win of the season on the bottom of the ladder in 18th place. With the business end out of the way, we can now dive into a little bit of fun. The portion of the video where I discussed the 2025 Hip and Shoulder MVP award, as well as my round 7 team of the week. If you're new around here, I'll explain how it goes down, but if you've been here before, you know exactly how this is going to be broken down. The MVP award is given as a 3-2-1 vote system, similar to the Brownlow Medal. Whoever I felt was best on ground will get 3 votes, and then whoever I felt was second best and then third best subsequently gets the 2 vote and the 1 vote. Whoever has the most votes at the end of the season becomes my MVP winner of 2025. An award that the players themselves will never know about, probably never give a fuck about, but it gives us a discussion point and it allows me to get more invested in each and every game of football over the weekend. I'm one of those supporters who love watching each and every game, and being able to impart my knowledge of the game into these videos is great fun for myself to deliver to you. I love content creation. I love the footy. Mix them together. It's a recipe for absolute greatness in my eyes anyway. So we're going to be kicking it off with those votes, and then the team of the week will follow. And the team of the week was something I created this year to not only show, who I feel were the better players in each role over the course of that weekend, but there might be some players who miss out on a vote that played incredibly well. I spoke about the Collingwood game earlier, and I said that I felt Nick Dacos might have played a little bit better than Josh, and Josh might not get votes from me this week, but he might end up in the team of the week, and it might happen with any other team similarly. That's just an example. So we'll get into the votes, then we'll get into the team of the week, and kicking the votes off, we start with the first game of the round, which was Melbourne taking on Richmond, Anzac Day Eve. 1 vote, Christian Petrarca. 28 disposals, 11 kicks, 17 handballs, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 342 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Jake Bowie. 32 disposals, 20 kicks, 12 handballs, 9 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 393 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. And 3 votes, Max Gawn. 25 disposals, 11 kicks, 14 handballs, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 34 hitouts, 6 clearances, 194 metres gained, and 12 score involvements. Anzac Day clash, Collingwood versus Essendon. 1 vote, Jamie Elliott. 19 disposals, 13 kicks, 6 handballs, 8 marks, 1 tackle, 297 metres gained, 5 goals, and 11 score involvements. 2 votes, Nick Dacos. 31 disposals, 18 kicks, 13 handballs, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 11 clearances, 619 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. 3 votes, Steele Sidebottom. 35 disposals, 18 kicks, 17 handballs, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 15 clearances, 598 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. Fremantle versus Adelaide. 1 vote, Jordan Clark. 27 disposals, 17 kicks, 10 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 501 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Caleb Sarong. 32 disposals, 6 kicks, 26 handballs, 2 tackles, 10 clearances, 176 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. 3 votes, Andrew Brayshaw. 37 disposals, 17 kicks, 20 handballs, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 522 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. St Kilda versus Brisbane. 1 vote, Will Ashcroft. 35 disposals, 16 kicks, 19 handballs, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 4 clearances, 376 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Dane Zorko. 34 disposals, 26 kicks, 8 handballs, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 3 clearances, 656 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 3 votes, Lockie Neal. 31 disposals, 16 kicks, 15 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 493 metres gained, 3 goals, and 12 score involvements. Port Adelaide versus North Melbourne. 1 vote, Jason Horne-Francis. 27 disposals, 15 kicks, 12 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances, 462 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Tristan Cherry. 23 disposals, 10 kicks, 13 handballs, 2 marks, 3 tackles, 39 hitouts, 7 clearances, 307 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. 3 votes, Zach Butters. 27 disposals, 14 kicks, 13 handballs, 1 mark, 13 tackles, 5 clearances, 381 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. GWS versus Western Bulldogs. 1 vote, Lockie Whitfield. 30 disposals, 22 kicks, 8 handballs, 11 marks, 429 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. 2 votes, Marcus Bontempelli. 22 disposals, 11 kicks, 11 handballs, 2 marks, 3 tackles, 8 clearances, 252 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. 3 votes, Ed Richards. 27 disposals, 18 kicks, 9 handballs, 2 marks, 2 tackles, 9 clearances, 704 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. Gold Coast versus Sydney. 1 vote, Touk Miller. 24 disposals, 11 kicks, 13 handballs, 3 tackles, 6 clearances, 521 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. 2 votes, John Noble. 30 disposals, 21 kicks, 9 handballs, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 584 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. 3 votes, Bailey Humphrey. 18 disposals, 11 kicks, 7 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 405 metres gained, 4 goals, and 11 score involvements. Carlton versus Geelong. 1 vote, Bailey Smith. 29 disposals, 19 kicks, 10 handballs, 5 marks, 9 tackles, 2 clearances, 749 metres gained, 1 goal, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, George Hewitt. 29 disposals, 9 kicks, 20 handballs, 4 marks, 8 tackles, 5 clearances, 284 metres gained, 1 goal, and 5 score involvements. 3 votes, Sam Walsh. 30 disposals, 10 kicks, 20 handballs, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 356 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. Hawthorn versus West Coast. 1 vote, Josh Battle. 29 disposals, 15 kicks, 14 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 1 clearance, 420 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, James Warple. 24 disposals, 9 kicks, 15 handballs, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 9 clearances, 357 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. 3 votes, Lloyd Meek. 19 disposals, 8 kicks, 11 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 57 hitouts, 4 clearances, 204 metres gained, and 11 score involvements. And with that, we do have a definitive first, second, and third place for the first time for the 2025 season. In third place on 10 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson. In second place on 11 votes, we have Fremantle's Andrew Brayshaw. And in first place on 13 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. There is only one thing left now, ladies. There is only one thing left to do, ladies and gentlemen, and that is to reveal my team of the week for round 7, which was a lot harder to build than I thought it would be, but I think we have landed on comprehensively the best selection of players. Again, the votes and the team of the week are objective to my own opinion. So if you agree, if you disagree, let's have a discussion about it in the comment section down below. Some of you already have been, and I appreciate it, but for those of you that are thinking about it and haven't taken the plunge, do it. I love having a conversation. I reply to all comments here. Do it. Go, do it, please. Starting from the defense, my back line sees Jordan Clark and Dane Zorko in the back pockets, with Josh Battle at fullback, and Jake Bowie and Josh Dacos off of the halfback flanks, with Luke Ryan at centre halfback. Across the centre, I have Steele Sidebottom and Zach Butters on the wings, with Lockie Neal in the centre. My forward line sees Christian Petrarca and Bailey Humphrey on the half-forward flanks, and Ben King at centre-half forward, with Jamie Elliott and Jack Gunston in the forward pockets, and Eric Hipwood at full forward. My followers see Max Gawn for a third week in a row in the ruck, Nick Dacos for the third week of a row as ruck rover, and Andrew Brayshaw shifting in at the rover spot. My bench is built up of James Warple, Will Ashcroft, Ed Richards, and Lloyd Meek. For the sub, simply because he was subbed out of this game and still somehow managed for fantasy football and Supercoach to continue scoring points by just sitting on the bench, I'm going with Marcus Bontempelli, because that blows my fucking mind. Marcus Bontempelli had a good game. I couldn't fit him on the team elsewhere, so the fact that he was subbed off, we can find that as a technicality to sneak him in as the sub. And coach of the round, given how comprehensively they defeated GWS on their home turf, I am giving it to the man who has always been loaded in the gun with me, Luke Beveridge. That is it for this video, done and dusted, and it is dropping at the start of the week as well, which is absolutely fantastic. We're finding continuity here. I think continuity has been our word of the day. continuity. Thank you for joining me again. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video, have been enjoying the videos I've been doing, and appreciate the effort that I've been putting into those videos. Do hit that like button if you enjoyed. If you want to get on board the community we are building, you can hit that subscribe button. Plenty of other long form videos to check out if you want to check out recent, round recaps I've done. If you want to go check out the SUPERCOACH stuff I'm doing, the tipping videos that I do, and I'm open to suggestion for any other AFL content you would like to do. I'm thinking maybe of doing a recap of what all the teams have done in the first third of the year, and seeing where they're sitting, where they should have been by expectations, and just grading them off of where they've performed. Probably after round 8 would be how I'm looking to do that. So if that's something you'd like to see, let me know. If you've got ideas for content you would like to see, let me know as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.